Welcome to Real Talk. This is your toolbox for business owners, leaders, and sales professionals, where we dive into real-world conversations, candid conversations about strategies, challenges that drive entrepreneurs. I'm Dr. Cynthia Howard, and today I am super excited to be with a powerhouse businesswoman, meaningful, powerful woman, Sandra, Dr. Sandra Brahm. And we are going to be talking about the power of purpose and how that can help you evolve into your own success. She's the president and CEO of Gulf Coast Jewish Family and Community Services, which is a $57 million social service agency with over 650 employees. And in her groundbreaking leadership, she did add over $25 million in revenue. She was also the first African-American woman at the St. Pete Chamber, elected as a board chair. She's now on the Economic and Development Committee at the Tampa Chamber, a native of St. Louis, Missouri, married with 3 children, and the author of an amazing groundbreaking book, which we will get into, called An Angel for Detroit, released in 2022. So Dr. Sandra Brahm, welcome to Real Talk. It's so wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
And maybe just tell the audience, because this is a little snippet of, like I said, your power broking that you do in the world, but tell the audience who you are, how you got started, and maybe where you started.
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I am a native of St. Louis, born to a mother. My father and mother divorced when I was about 2 years old. I have an older sister and a younger sibling, and so my mother had 3 daughters. My mother also had schizophrenia, so we grew up with her in and out of mental institutions, but she was a strong woman of faith, and we were raised in my grandfather's home primarily. He was a Baptist preacher, and I come from a long line of Baptist preachers. And so we were raised in the church, raised to, love the Lord and learning to pray. And so I grew up low income in that environment, but also valuing education and loving life and loving the Lord. And wanted to be a doctor. So I went to college to study biology and decided my junior year I didn't want to do that, and stumbled into, but it probably was more intentional. But basically I began doing college recruitment, helping with student visits at the University of Missouri, where I eventually graduated, and moved to Indiana, began working in college admissions. That took me to El Paso, Texas, where I continued my work in higher education for the next 14 years, helping low-income students to get into college, migrant and seasonal farm workers to get their GEDs, and really helping students stay in college so that they could improve their lives. I myself, having been first generation college. So after that, I was volunteering for community organizations on the boards. And after some years of being involved with one such organization, I had an experience, is the only way I can call it, where God showed me that I was to shift. And it was a jarring experience that I write about in my book, but that experience didn't come to fruition for 3 years. And I literally, overnight, left higher education and began a career in nonprofit management, becoming the CEO of this very large YWCA. And after 10 years there, I was recruited here to Florida to lead a very large Jewish organization that has been a tremendous gift. So that's kind of the short answer of how I got here.
Yeah, let's go back a little bit, because there's a lot in there.
Yes.
So when you were, because everything that you've done sounds purposeful and meaningful. while you were working and you were providing, you were also giving back. So talk about how your faith really helped you go deeper in terms of your decisions.
That's a great question. So initially, I will say that I spent a lot of time in high school because it was during that time that my mother became symptomatic with schizophrenia after being on meds for many years, and the laws had changed, so we couldn't make her go into the hospital. So she basically chose not to, and that put the siblings in a bit of a separated situation, and I myself ended up in foster care. And so school became a safe place for me. I threw myself into many activities, but I also joined the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and that became a space of prayer. And as my life changed and I was emancipated from foster care, I literally had no place else to go, so I was homeless for a few months, basically couch surfing or staying with others. A family took me in, but I learned really to rely on that prayer, asking God, which way do I go? And it was at 17 that I think, had my first experience on my 17th birthday, where it was very clear to me that I was hearing something. At that point, I didn't realize it was God. It was just a voice. And that is when I was basically committed to writing this book. And I knew I was supposed to do it, but I heard this voice that said, you haven't lived long enough. Give it some time, live a bit more, and when it's time, you'll write your book. And so it took decades for me to get to that point, to where I felt that it was time to write the book. But learning to listen and to still myself, to read the Bible and trust what God was saying really became a practice.
Yeah, I'd love for you to say more about that. I want to talk about your management and your leadership, but if you would talk a little bit more right now about what are those daily disciplines that you learned early on that kept you either reading the Bible or listening to God. Talk about that, because that is really the foundation, it sounds like, of who you are.
So I learned, this guy, it's like not one of my favorite moments, but I will tell you, there was a time in my life where I had gone through a divorce. I was married before my current husband, wonderful husband of 30 years this year, but I divorced, and I was trying to figure out which way do I go, and a friend suggested that I see a psychic. So I was like, okay. So I went to see this psychic and saw her for a few times. And it was like, I thought she was pretty legitimate. And I think that, she did have some sort of connection. But then as a couple of years passed and I met my new husband and we, began having children and raised our children in the church, I was like, I have learned that God shows me everything I need to see. I have learned that if I pray about it, if I get up and read the Bible, that's a discipline, just daily finding the time and making the time to read the Bible. And I can't say that 100% of every day I do it, but it is a discipline that I work to try to do daily. And taking things, learning how the Bible works as a tool, those verses to inspire you, to give you hope, to guide you to your purpose. And when you trust that what you're hearing, because you've turned it over to God and you're saying, hey, show me the way, I think there's a level of discipline. So the other piece of it is having the discipline to really wait and do what we're being told to do. For example, I'm asking for a new job, not now, but back in those days. And, someone would say, Sandra, I think you'd be great at this. Why don't you apply for this job? And I might say, oh, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to do something else. Well, when you're trusting and waiting on God to give you direction, you basically have to have obedience. And that obedience is, we don't know what direction God is going to come from. We don't know what direction that is going to, how it's going to show up. So the discipline is, if I've been encouraged to apply for a position that I'm really qualified for, I may not want it, but I'm going to be obedient, and I'm going to apply for that position because God's going to tell me, and he's going to open the door. If that's where I'm supposed to be, and that door is going to open. I'm going to walk through that door, and that's going to be fine. If it's not where I'm supposed to be, that door is going to close. And that's the way my whole life has been. It's been my whole life. And I think, again, coming from a family of praying people, of believers, of learning that, people go and see psychics, but, God tells us, the Bible tells us that we are spiritual, and there are ways that God speaks to us and guides us. And so we need to learn to hone in on that and to basically find that space to hear and to sense and to feel what we're being directed to do.
Yeah, that is so powerful, because to have that discipline that you're talking about is you have to submit to the higher power, but on the other hand, you also learn to lead, and you learn to be a strong leader and a bold leader. So that is a dance. That's a balancing act.
It is. It's definitely a dance, and there were times when I've had to make tough decisions as a leader about who to promote, who to hire, what to do with a position. And I struggled with it and maybe, I had a dream. That's another way that I've learned to listen, is, those dreams that are not necessarily like, oh, I ate bad spaghetti and I'm having a nightmare. But those dreams can guide you to things. And I had a dream once that where I was trying to make a decision about promoting someone, and I was struggling with that decision. And I had a dream about a tornado, a storm, and I gathered my 3 children and went to the foundation of our home, because it was a single-story home. There was no basement. But I grabbed my children, I hugged them, and we braced ourselves in that foundation, in the frame of the home. And it wasn't until the next day I'm in the office and I'm doing things, and I'm struggling with this decision about who to promote. And there in front of my eyes was the bookcase. And on the bookcase were 3 binders of grant programs that I had written and developed. These were my babies. And the foundation of a grant, of a program, of a new grant federal initiative is, what did you say you were going to do? That's the foundation. So I grabbed the binder for the program that I was struggling with, and I went to the qualifications of the directors. And I read it, and there before my eyes, the individual that I was struggling not to promote, basically, they weren't qualified for the position. But I had forgotten, I had written what these qualifications would be, and it made the decision very clear. This is what you said you were going to do. This is what the government is going to hold you accountable for. This is what you must present to them, because they had to approve the new directors of any programs. And so so yeah. So again, it goes hand in hand with leadership, but you have to discern, where and how to go with that.
That is an amazing story. I love that story. I also get dreams, but the way that God used that information for you, and that's the other thing I love about God, is he's very personal. He will take all of our experiences and use them as long as we are open and listen. And so how do you continue to exercise that discernment in, say, business life? you know, because you have a huge organization, you've expanded it, and there's a lot of distraction and disruption in the world today. So talk about that if you could.
So I think what's great about Gulf Coast JFCS, the organization that I lead, is it's extremely diverse in the types of programs and the people that it serves. And we have so many ways to support folks. So I think in leadership here, it's really stemmed from looking at the organizational values, which completely align with mine about respect and repairing the world, basically helping to respect our elders and thinking about generational service and how we honor our elders. So you take those values into the workplace, and I try to apply those values to all the decisions that I'm making. Does it align with our mission? Is it congruent with our values? Just as we have Christian values, we have to ask ourselves, are the decisions that we're making, the actions that we're taking aligned to those values? Are we doing the right thing to do the most good for the most people? That doesn't mean people won't get hurt in the process, but I have also learned through leadership that when you do what you are directed to do and you make those decisions for good, you may be helping someone along who struggled to leave that organization, and now they leave and they find their purpose because you were able to comfortably let them go.
Yeah, that's powerful. It's win-win. That is really the definition of a win-win. But I do want to talk about your book, because you mentioned it early on in our discussion that God told you were going to write a book. So tell a little bit about how the book came about and a little bit about the book. It's a bestseller, highly recommended. It's extremely engaging and very powerful.
So this book, An Angel for Detroit, I will tell you the title came, the publisher really helped me with the title. I had a little video that had this title, and the publisher asked, "Is that the title of the book?" And I said, "I guess it is." But I struggled with that because, I said I was going to write this book. I knew I needed to live a bit more. So about 30 years passed. And I finally, after being promoted into that first CEO position and shifting from higher education to nonprofit management, I said, now is the time to start this book. And I started just writing from my very first memory. I wrote a draft, gave it to my history professor and 2 others to read. And the feedback that I received back was incredible. And that feedback took me on what became a 15-year journey of research, family history, and just learning to wait and be patient.
Oh, again.
Because again, had I published this book at 10 years, it would not be the book that it was, that it is today. And so I think there's something to be said also about patience and knowing that if you're not just, I just don't want to do it, I don't feel like it, but life happens. And so you put it down because you've got to move through your life, but you are also gaining new experiences to continue to show the evolution of that story and where it's to take people.
And how did that process of 15 years of diving into your family history, of getting to know all of the characters and the themes, how did that change you or affect you? What was the impact? Because that's a very deep process all by itself.
Yes. What's most interesting is my very first memory, and I talk about that also, is the night my grandmother passed. And I thought, I was probably 2 years old. But as I started going back and looking at the history and describing that memory, I was 11 months when my grandmother passed.
When I read that, I'm like, whoa.
And so I was the only one who she gave a nickname to. But as I began to research her, she just appeared on the scene, and I couldn't find a lot about her in Ancestry, and I began to interview aunts and uncles, and oh my goodness, the stories that came out of that really are rich. And it really, you see sort of where that nuance of spirituality and faith and just the, I don't want to use the wrong word, but it's the power of faith that drives you to these incredible places. And you just learn that wow, it was incredible. And I realized that that's who I am, and it's okay.
There's a lot of love. I mean, I think it's a power of faith and love, because all those stories come out of our hearts, but in your family, there's some really deep experiences that you had. And so as a result, now looking back, what would you tell somebody who might have a book in their heart or in their head? Is there any advice that you want to share?
I would share that if it's in your heart and it's in your mind, I'm sure that it's a story that should be told. And there's no time like the present to start it. And there's no time necessarily by when it must be finished.
Oh, I love that.
Just do it. Tell the story, start writing, but also get professional help. I will say that, because as great a writer as I thought I was, having a publicist and having them guide, the editing process, it was remarkable. The book came to life in a way that even I was in awe. And so get some help with that publishing. You can self-publish, but I would still hire some editors and make sure that you give it the best.
And before we close, I have to ask this. What advice would you give someone who's a new CEO? Because you have evolved professionally quite a bit and reached a really high level of leadership. So before we close, just talk a little bit about that. What would you say to a new CEO?
I would advise, number one, to know the company that you're leading. If it's your own company and you're new at it, you really have to immerse yourself in your mission. You have to listen to what you're hearing around you and give it some time. I wouldn't recommend the Doge mentality of hatcheting up, just going in and tearing things up. But I think, again, if you're making godly change, it involves listening, it involves heart, it involves ensuring that you know what's already there before you begin to make change. Some changes you may have to make immediately that are ethical, things that are not proper. But when it comes to people and humans, I think you have to give it time, learn who they are, because we're so different. And it's not necessarily a bad or good thing. In order to get the best out of everyone, you have to invest some time in understanding who they are, because that's your work culture and that's who's representing you.
What a powerful discussion, Sandra. You have given some really amazing tips and stories and told from your heart how important it is to embrace faith so that you can live your purpose, live out your purpose. And I think when you live a life of purpose and intention, not only do you have meaning, but everyone around you has meaning.
Yes.
Yeah. So this wraps up another great discussion on Real Talk. Thank you for joining us for Candid Conversations with Business Owners, because success starts when you get real. In the meantime, stay focused and stay energized.